going on, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Mean Streets. Chris Meaney here with you as we bring in Quisenberg at DFS. He is the senior NBA advisor over at FTN Everything Basketball, also the co-host of the Prize Picks Prop Show, available to you at FTN as well. It is Mr. Zac Graham in here. Zach, appreciate it, man. Always love chopping it up with you, talking basketball. You take the time out of your busy day to join me roughly every time this season. Start of the season, we chop it up. Midway through the season, talk about the NBA draft. We talk about the NBA trade deadline. No Wemby conversations today, but he may pop up, and he should pop up here and there because he's been absolutely spectacular, and you were spot on with your analysis. I remember talking about him just after the draft and what to expect in his first season, and I think he exceeded expectations. But we're going to talk about the Clippers and the Mavericks, one of the most intriguing first-round matchups in the NBA. These two teams had moments where they were at top of the NBA world. Lately, it has been the Dallas Mavericks. They do check in as series favorites, being in the 5 spot here as the 5 seed in the West, 50-32, minus 125 to win the series, according to DraftKings, and the Clippers checking in at plus 105. The Clippers do have shorter odds to win the NBA championship. We'll get into some NBA championship stuff in just a little bit, but I want to really dive into this series with you here and get your thoughts on it. This is the third time in the last 5 years that these two teams are playing in the playoffs. The Clippers took 2 of 3 against the Mavs this season, but Zach, they hadn't played each other since late December. The last time these two teams played, December 20th. Since January 1st, Dallas 31-18, the Clippers 32-19. But since the trade deadline on February 8th, the Mavericks check in with the third best record in the NBA at 21-9. The second best in the West behind OKC, 22-9, played one more game than them, had one more W. Of course, the Celtics are up at the top. But Dallas, top 5 rating offensively since the deadline. That shouldn't surprise anybody, but the defense is playing pretty good. Top 5 rating defensively over the last 15 games, arguably the best defense in the NBA. Getting Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington has really kind of shaped this team up a little bit. And before I get your thoughts on it, this one on the other side with the Clippers, you know, when they got Harden, they had the 5 straight losses. It took some time for Lou to kind of figure out their rotation, but then they went on a run, man. From mid-November to early February, this was the best team in the NBA. They were 31-8, but over the last 30, they've hardly been above 500. And of course, the big question is Kawhi. Saw yesterday, Tyronn Lue says Kawhi is progressing, but he hasn't been cleared to play 5-5 drills, but he expects him to play in the postseason. This is the postseason, right? He hasn't played in the final 8 games. He's going to play. And the 68 games that Kawhi played this season, the most that he's played since 2016. And he was, oh man, you had to have been pretty impressed with his season. It looked like old vintage Kawhi, averaging 23 points per game, putting his team on his back, and playing really good brand of basketball. This is extremely tough series, I think, for me to call. You are the sharper NBA mind. What do you think when you break down this matchup?
I mean, I think all those things you mentioned are factors we need to take into account here, starting with what you talked about. These teams have not met since 2023, really, like all 3 of the season series. It was wrapped up by the time the calendar turned to 2024. So you also mentioned kind of the bookend, right, style of this Clippers season, where rough start, maybe putting it nicely, even after that Harden trade. Then all of a sudden, the meat of this sandwich, they're the best team in the league record-wise throughout that stretch you mentioned. Kawhi was maybe even putting his name into the hat for MVP. And then they drop off to end the season. Then Kawhi goes AWOL for 2.5, 3 weeks to close out the season. I think he's fine. And again, that's all relative. It's Kawhi Leonard. He was fine to start the postseason last year. And I would make the argument that through the first 2 games of the first round in last year's playoffs, he was the best player in the tournament. But then meniscus injury, he's out. And you know how it ended. So, you know, I think I am, obviously, he's my namesake here with the username. I'm still a Kawhi fan, even though I'm not a Clippers fan. So I want to see him at his best, what we saw him doing in the middle of the season. And that's really the only chance in my eyes that the Clippers have. So I'm approaching this series like Kawhi is ready to go, because Ty Lue, I listened to Norm Powell's pre-series press conference yesterday afternoon. These guys are being coy with Kawhi's status. I think he's good. But all that to say, it's near impossible to suggest that Luka Doncic isn't the best player in this series after what he put out there this season, 34 points a game, over 9 rebounds, almost 10 assists per game, shooting 49% from the field, 38 from 3 on massive volume. Like, I love Luka. This was the first season in the last 4 that I didn't pick him to win MVP preseason, and he got closer this year than he has in those previous 3. But I do think overall, the deeper team here, clearly, to me, is Los Angeles. And I think some concerns I have from the Dallas side. The Clippers are going to hunt matchups here like crazy, right? Kyrie and Luka will have to guard eventually, right? Luka's going to spend a lot of time on Terrence Mann. They'll sit him on Russell Westbrook when he comes in. If Amir Coffey is still in this rotation, which he should be, Luka will sit a lot on that, resting a little bit. But ultimately, as the series progresses, there's not going to be anywhere to hide for the full 48 in these games. Kyrie and Luka are going to have to guard eventually. And then on the other side, the flexibility for the Clippers, again, I just think they have a little bit of a leg up there. You're going to see Terrence Mann on the other side, primarily on Luka. Paul George is probably going to be called on to guard Kyrie here to start. And then you're going to get guys like Kawhi and Harden able to rest a little bit against a guy like Derrick Jones Jr., who Dallas kind of has to play for the defensive ability that he brings. And then PJ Washington, of course, has been awesome since the trade, but you'd rather have Harden or Kawhi being able to guard a PJ Washington than a Luka or a Kyrie. And of course, you've got Daniel Gafford's been playing great. If Derek Lively's going to be back in the mix here, I like him out there in that backup role much more than a guy like Dwight Powell. So hopefully the rookie is back and ready to go here. And so, again, despite the slow start to the season and that downturn late on, Clips still a top 5 offense across the full season sample size, right? Defensively, over the full season, right on par with Dallas. You mentioned, though, Dallas really picked it up after the trade deadline. And I think PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford both maybe proving some doubters wrong about their defensive acumen and how good they can be on that end, how much they can contribute. So I think if one team in this series has room to flip a switch, to me, it's the Clippers, because I think Dallas has kind of been already firing on all cylinders. I don't know how much more a guy like Luka and Kyrie can do, how much more they can play. So I'm leaning right now Clippers in 7. But if Kawhi Leonard is not 100%, and again, when's the last time we saw that throughout a full postseason? Then I think it's going to tilt strongly in favor of the Mavericks. But like I said, I'm treating this like Kawhi Leonard is ready to go. So I'm going to give the Clips the edge slightly in 7 games.
I agree if there's a team that can flip a switch. I see what you're saying there, right? We just talked about how good they were when they were at full health and Kawhi, and then down the stretch here, whatever. It seemed like the Clippers were locked into this spot for quite some time. The Mavs had to, pull some wins together a lot in a row to avoid the play-in. I'm sure they didn't want the Clippers. It's a tough matchup. I think the toughest for sure to call in the Western Conference. And we'll get into some odds later in terms of overall teams, but I think a little sprinkle on either one of these teams, whoever can get out of this series, avoid Denver in round 2, could maybe potentially make a run. Do you believe in what you've seen from the Mavs defense, or is this just they're beating up on some weak teams? They did have a game against the Nuggets where they won on a crazy Kyrie hook shot at the end. What a show. It was wild. So they have won some pretty crazy, tight games against some good teams, but they have also beat up on some pretty brutal teams. But that was the biggest thing with Dallas. Nobody believed in them, right? They got Kyrie last year was a joke. They sat out. Got a top pick and things like that. It worked. Yeah. And then halfway through the season, I think from the start to the midpoint, we're the Mavs are fine. They can score. Kyrie and Luka, these guys can score. Hardaway can hit his threes. Kleba can hit his threes. Even Exum lately has been playing good. But I don't know. In that first half of the season, it's just they just can't play defense. So they're just, we can't take this team seriously. But in the second half, in particular, what I alluded to, since the deadline, the defensive rating has been good. Kid has them playing really well. Do you believe in the defense? Like, because you
Yeah, I
have the
mean,
series going 7, but is this defense good enough to actually make a legitimate run? Because when they get into playing a team like Denver, like, great, they can keep up offensively, but are they going to have any answers?
I think, again, barring health, and I'm getting ahead of myself here, I would lean towards picking the winner of this series against what you would think would be an Oklahoma City Thunder team waiting for them in the second round, because I think if the Clippers make it through this, that means Kawhi's healthy. And then I think the Clippers have the best player in that potential second round series. And I think it's very clear that if Dallas gets through, that Luka is the best player in that potential second round matchup with the Thunder. To answer your question about the defense, I think it's real enough, right? Real enough to have me taking the Clippers to 7 here. And again, I am not shocked at all if Dallas wins this series, even if Kawhi Leonard is healthy. And you see it, you mentioned it earlier, right? Lower seed, but the favorites on DK Sportsbook right now. I do think the last note I'll say on the coaching, and maybe you have some more to say, because again, you are the resident Mavericks fan here. I think the coaching edge also goes to the Clippers, just based on what Ty Lue has done in his coaching career.
I would agree
and
with
his
that.
ability to adjust throughout a long series like this one, like I expect this one to be.
Is just looking at DraftKings and seeing like over 5.5 games is really juiced at -195, but you can parlay some of this stuff. So maybe that's, I would say it's going at least 6. For the Clippers to win in 7 is +340. For the Mavs to win in 7, it's +650. And for this series to just have 7 games, it's +320. There's a pretty decent odds there. I think that they'll trade punches. They'll go back and forth. I think all these games will be pretty highly entertaining. I'm glad you brought up how like the Clippers will defend. And I'll get you out of here on like one kind of simple question at the end.
Okay.
I don't know if it's simple or not, but I think you broke it down with how are you going to defend Luka and Kyrie? Like, get the ball double. I saw Garnett and Paul Pierce talking about like, and Garnett's like, I mean, double Luka all the time, like double him nonstop, double, get the ball out of his hands, and you hope that PJ Washington, Kleba, some of these guys Hardaway can hit those open shots. Harden's not going to be on Kyrie. I think that the X factor in this series is man. I think he's like his defensive play, his offense. Like, I feel like he the biggest X factor in this series for both teams.
I think you might be onto something there, Chris. And I think just the fact that we're talking about this and we're talking about Terrence Mann in this light shows why they were so keen to hang on to him in that potential Harden deal, leading up to the days in that trade where you're seeing different types of rumors and offers being thrown about. And the sticking point was, we are not giving up Terrence Mann. And yeah, I'm with you. Again, the fact that he is going to be the primary defender here on Luka, he's going to take his turn on Kyrie. And this Clippers team is deep enough where they don't need to rely on a guy like that as much offensively as I think maybe you need the importance of like the 2 or 3 open 3-point attempts that Derek Jones Jr. gets in a game. I think that is much more important for Dallas than on the flip side with Terrence Mann. Like the Clippers just have more primary offensive options. And you kind of mentioned James Harden there as well. I do think for the Clippers to come out on top in this series, you're going to need to see at least one James Harden game where it's like 25 plus points, 8 assists, 7 boards, like closer to that vintage Harden. Because I just don't think 12 points, 9 assists, 6 boards is going to get it done. You need a little bit more out of James Harden in this series than you've seen over the last month or so.
Yeah. All right. There it is. As you mentioned, Mavs is the lower seed here, the favorite at -125, and the Clippers at +105, 51-31 for LA, 50-32 for Dallas. Again, two teams trending in opposite directions, but Kawhi has been resting over the last little bit. Playoff Kawhi, it does scare me. We'll have to hear from you guys in the comments because, yes, Mavs fan for life, maybe a little biased. Kawhisenberg in the name here, maybe a little bit biased, but we both agree that this series is going to go the distance. 7 games. I think +340 is pretty interesting as a prop to see 7 games. Clippers +340 to win in 7, and the Mavs +650 to win in 7 as well. A little bit of juice on the over 5.5 games in the series at -195. I think if this is over in 5, I actually think it's because the Mavs took care of them in 5, and it's because Kawhi's not completely healthy, and that this Dallas team is just clicking right now. I'll admit, man, they're really fun to watch. Like, it's just, you can kind of see it with the team and the progress, like as a team, like throughout the season. It's like, oh, can Kyrie and Luka gel together? Do they like each other? All this nonsense. But these guys are hugging all the time. Like, everyone is just like playing for each other. It does feel like pretty good vibes in Dallas right now. I'm not going to lie. But there's a lot that the Clippers have to offer.
The two teams from this series that we're talking about that I would want to sprinkle on here, because again, like we mentioned, potential second round matchup with the Thunder. I think I would pick these lower seeded teams to upset them, so to speak, in that second round series. And then of course you're having to get over probably that Denver hurdle in the conference finals. But again, I think these are the two teams that make the most sense. The way the bracket has fallen in the West, these two teams make the most sense to me on who could potentially get the better of Denver. 6 to 8 weeks from now. It's going to be a long playoffs, and it's the best time of year in my eyes.
Yeah, I would agree. It really is. It's hard to imagine the Celtics like losing. I don't know, just with some of the injuries that have happened to certain teams in the East and how healthy is Joel Embiid, right? This is a team that was pretty unstoppable when he was on the floor for the 76ers, but the Celtics have been unstoppable all year long. And I think that they're favorites for a reason. I would expect them to go the distance. I would expect them to see them in the finals. And I think you can make a case for a couple different Western Conference teams. Follow Zac on Twitter at Queisenberg DFS. Check out the Prize Picks Prop Show. And if you are in our Prize Picks Prop Show Discord channel, then you know how well Zac and Alex are crushing it when it comes to these picks and props. So they'll be with you throughout the entire NBA playoffs, giving you some edges. Subscribe for free to the FTN YouTube page. And again, I want to hear your guys' thoughts. Let us know in the comments on TikTok, IG here, and our YouTube page, who you think is going to win between the Dallas Mavericks and the LA Clippers. I'm saying Mavs in 7. He is saying Clippers in 7, but again, we may be a little bit biased here.